I think before I ask my questions, I'd just like to state that I think all of the criticisms around the table here are not directed to DWP staff on the ground, who I know in the most part are trying to do a good and difficult job. However, I'd like to pick up on some of the points about universal credit and also some of the points that my colleague Mark Griffin's just raised there. I presume by being here today, Secretary of State, that you see devolution of social security as a priority. However, the delay that there's been in, and the admission of the delay in allowing the Scottish Government to take forward its policy to abolish the bedroom tax at source, says to me that there isn't a proper plan to prioritise social security and to enable the Scottish Government to fulfil its policy objectives. The fact that you and officials there were unable to answer really important questions about universal credit flexibilities in terms of the frequency of payment and payment to landlords worries me greatly. The fact that split payments, which my colleague rightly said is a real priority across parties in this Parliament, the fact that there's no timetable for enabling that to happen is deeply concerning. And all of this together says to me that there seems to be a continual pushback from the DWP to enabling social security devolution to happen in Scotland. There doesn't seem to be plans, and it doesn't seem to be a priority. And I think that requires reflection on the basis of this meeting and some serious prioritisation of these issues in the DWP. I appreciate you've got a lot on your plate at the moment. The department's in real crisis with cases that have come forward on PIP and other matters that have arisen in recent months. But this needs to be a priority, and I would welcome your thoughts on that before I ask my next questions.
Well, obviously you need reassurance on what is going on, because there is certainly no pushback. Devolution has gone ahead. The Scotland Act has gone through. The extra support that Government Scotland has needed to allow for these flexibilities has happened. Those flexibilities are there. The extra powers that have gone to Scotland, so whether they want to add to a benefit, whether they want to create a new benefit, whether they want to pay additional payments to a benefit, are all there and at the disposal of the Scottish Parliament to take control of and move forward. So the devolution has gone through there. And then, as you say, when we work together on reserved matters, obviously understanding the sort of complexities of systems, of IT systems, of working together, yes, we've got to work through them and got to be given sufficient time to be able to do that. And that's why I said we are working regularly. There is a team of senior officials meeting every month. Ministers are meeting quarterly. Lots of information has come across. There has been project days, working days, continually going forward. So actually, people are working at a pace. But what I do, and I had mentioned before, we need is the specific detail on certain matters that we are waiting for to be able to put these forward in a timely way. But definitely, and as you said, that's why I'm here today, to say that that is right. Whilst I agree in the union, I do understand there is an appetite for greater devolution on the ground to make it work for Scotland, and that's exactly what I'm here to agree to and make sure that we're doing.
Sure, and I welcome the fact that you are showing this Parliament the respect it deserves, and that it is more than Lincoln County Council is. With all respect to Lincoln County Council, that one of your colleagues made reference to this Parliament being synonymous with. But I think what I'm really looking for, Secretary of State, and what this Parliament well, many members of this Parliament and certainly many members of the Scottish public are looking for, is a timetable, a commitment for, and I know you've committed already to providing detail of when the flexibilities around universal credit in terms of regularity of payment and payment to landlords, and welcome that correspondence coming as soon as possible. But we need a commitment on split payments, and we need a commitment to bringing forward the ability for the Scottish Government to abolish the bedroom tax at source much sooner than May 2020. May 2020 is a delay. Previously, there was an assumption that that would happen quicker.
Well, I answered that at the start. You have the commitment. We are doing that. It was never agreed to be earlier, but we said we'd work together to do it as soon as possible. Discretionary housing payments are there at the moment, which is how it is being resolved. So all of these matters are being done now. They are being dealt with now. It was just the extra bit of changing the IT for UC that we always said would have to be done as soon as possible. But these issues that you're talking with are being dealt with. I know, Denise, you wanted to say a few words.
So just for clarity, more frequent payments and direct payment to landlords, those choices are in. The bit that isn't, that I wasn't able to talk about, was the transfer of money. Well, to be honest, that's in the background. The important thing is that we've responded, we've changed the systems, and they're operational for customers in Scotland. So those things are in, and I just want to re-clarify, those two items have been operating now for around about, well, it's from January, so...
And as you say, the bit was, what was the cost of that, which we can clarify for you, but actually having delivered it, the UK government has delivered it with and for Scotland because we said we would, and it's now in place.
Well, obviously I welcome that, and I think that's demonstrative of the fact that split payments can be made to happen if there's a commitment on both sides to work together to deliver that as quickly as possible. And similarly, that the abolition of the benefit tax at source could be done in a quicker way when there's a focus and a determination on both sides. Very quickly, Convener, I just wanted to also say, Secretary of State, I welcome your step away from the the commitment to ending housing benefit for 18 to 21-year-olds. I think that was there was strong opposition to that policy in this Parliament, and that was a very welcome move that you stepped away from that because of the wrong-headedness of that policy and the fact that it wasn't really delivering anything positive for the taxpayer or and causing suffering to those affected. In a similar way, as Alison Johnson pointed out, I think you should reconsider advances on universal credit. While there's been a commitment to bringing those forward in a more timious manner, a more effective manner, the fact that those are still advances that have to be repaid is something that is, from our experience of the evidence that we've taken, detrimental. And in a similar way, the whole ethos of universal credit is based, in my view, and the views of many, on suspicion and assuming the worst in people instead of encouragement and help, which is a word you used earlier. There are people in the back of the audience behind you who've either campaigners or individuals who'd suffered greatly at the hands of welfare reform agenda. There are constituents who've cried in front of me in surgeries, and I know colleagues have been the same. This is a wrong-headed policy in the way that, in the ethos that it's being approached at the moment. And in the same way that you've changed your position on housing benefit for 18 to 21-year-olds, my plea in good faith is that you take away from this committee to look again at universal credit and change it to be a supportive system rather than a cynical and critical system. And as well, I asked this to your predecessor, and I want to ask it to you as well today. First of all, to rethink, because of this, the consequences that it's having, and also the fact that you're on course to make more savings through social security now than you were, and so the need for austerity is significantly less if there was a need for one at all. But also, I want to give you the opportunity to apologise to the people behind you, the people across my constituency and the people across Scotland who've suffered greatly through the mistakes of social security reform, welfare reform, and I think are due that apology from the DWP for the suffering and distress that's been caused to them.
Well, the aim for universal credit is that it is a supportive system. that there is support, whether that's into work or whether that is support if you can't get into work with social security payments there.
Can we suspend, please? Suspended to session, and please continue.
And what we were saying was universal credit is a supportive system, and that's what it aims to be. But I am not oblivious to people who are incredibly vulnerable or who are in need. And obviously the gentleman felt he needed to have his points said about something that was very important to him, about somebody who was very vulnerable. But what we aim to do with the money we spend from DWP, which is nearly £200 billion per year, the department is the size of a country the size of Portugal or of Greece or of Chile. This is the kind of support we're giving. 80,000 people working there to make sure that we reach out to the most vulnerable. So we do that. If anybody doesn't get that support, it is not through lack of trying, because that's what people are employed to do, is to reach out and support people. It is important that we hear every instance, and it is important that we work as hard as we possibly can to support everybody who needs our help. But it is about making sure we have the most effective system to help people and employ the most dedicated people in our job centres to help people, and that is what we do, and we have as best oversight as we possibly can, learning from it all the time as best as we possibly can.
I think I just...
I'm really conscious of time, and I've got two other members who want to come in on your areas, so I think we've covered that area quite extensively. Ms Johnson, you wanted to come in on... Sorry, I thought you had another area to come in. Ms McNeill, would you like to come in?
Yep. I listened carefully to what you said to the committee about the good points about the universal credit system, and I do agree that the reason for introducing it, that it could be much more flexible, is a good one. But so far you don't seem to have acknowledged any of the questions put to you and any of the evidence that there has been. You surely must have heard the same evidence as we've heard. I mean, for example, it is a fact that on housing benefit alone in Scotland, those who transfer to universal credit are £24 a week worse off So surely there must be an acceptance that there's a lot more fixing to do than you've acknowledged to the committee already. I mean, that's just housing. Others, as you've heard on the table this morning, the increase in the number of food banks in areas where universal credit has been rolled out has definitely increased. So the idea is right, and like Ben McPherson, I welcome that you're the Secretary of State that has begun to fix some of this, as you did, in doing the right decision in rolling back the decision for 16 to 24, which we all welcome. But there's more fixing to be done if universal credit is to be a better system. And surely you would accept that there is much more fixing to do. And the housing figure alone, I think, speaks for itself.
I am listening to the issues that people raise, whether it is the Citizens Advice Bureau, whether it is the Trussell Trust, whether it is action groups on the ground. That's what I spend most of my day doing, is meeting with those people, meeting with claimants to see where is it working, how could we make it better, how could we implement or alter some of the conditions of universal credit. And you'll see those have changed where we felt it wasn't working to make sure it did. And as I've said, you've got to look in the round too. So when I look at how things have changed from 2010 to now in Scotland, and I see that unemployment has nearly halved. When I look at the child poverty statistics in Scotland, and it has decreased across all 4 of the main measures between the 3 years between 2016-17 compared to the 3 years between 2009-10. And when I meet with and work with the all-parliamentary party group on hunger and look at the reports from Trussell Trust and Oxford University, who talk about the overlaying and the complex reasons behind people going to food banks and how we need to support people going forward, and whether that is in debt management, whether that is in support, we're trying to do all of those. And I do see positive figures from Scotland of people in work, creating businesses. The fact that those poverty measures have
but do you
dropped.
accept, though, fair enough, but do you accept, though, that there is detriment to many people too? I mean, the figure that I use is a real figure. Those who've transitioned to universal credit on average are £24 worse off on their housing benefit element. Does that not suggest that there is a structural problem? Because the promise that was made was that when you transition to universal credit different system, that it wouldn't affect your overall income. That was the promise that was made.
But as I keep saying, you can't unlock how the economy is changing, because the social security, the economy, people in work, all are linked together. And what we're seeing is employment going up. What we're seeing is unemployment going down. What we're seeing is the highest wage rises, or the fastest wage rises for the lowest in society, through the introduction of the national living wage. We're also seeing we're taking people out of taxation, removing people from paying taxation altogether. So all of those
So there's no
changes,
detriment. You don't think that people who've transitioned, is that what you're saying to the committee today? You don't see that there has been any detriment? You only see the good side? Is that what you're saying to the committee
I
today?
see what everybody saw was the legacy benefits that were in place were not working. They were locking people into unemployment at the 16-hour rule. These things and cases that you are raising now, they existed in the legacy benefits. What we're seeing is an improvement from those legacy benefits to a new, modern, more simplified and swifter system. So that's what we're moving towards, making what was there better, and to try and indicate that the legacy benefits were better is not true. And also what you're seeing overlaying this is the extra support and the growth of the economy here on the ground. And you've got to take all those component parts, and we've got to do the best we can in the position we are to make a better system for the people who are claiming. And that's what we're doing. We're all on a journey. We're on a journey together to make everybody's lives the best they can, but that's to help them into work, that's to help with job progression, that's to give better education and to improve people's lives.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Mr. Balfour.
It's on another area. Sorry.
We do know that we're a bit tight for time, but another area is fine at the moment.
Good morning, Secretary of State, and thank you again for coming this morning. I have two quick questions, if that's okay. The first one is in regard to, following on my question from Adam Tompkins around PIP and DLA and attendance allowance. Obviously, we haven't yet seen the regulations of how it will work in practice. But if we end up with different criteria for people getting PIP, what difficulties do you foresee will cause that for DWP, and how much work will be involved in providing the information to Scottish Government in regard to that? And my second question is just changing the subject really completely, and that is looking at employability. I think we all agree that the best way out of poverty for everyone is employability for individuals and for families. One of the areas that I have a concern around is around disability, and I know your department is doing work on that. But a number of employers have spoken to me recently about how there is obviously division between employment law, devolved and non-devolved, and Scottish Parliament have, or Scottish Government have their website with information about employability on theirs, and you have stuff on that. Would there be a possibility of a conversation between the two governments about bringing together information so that there's a single portal that employers and employees can go to find out what both governments are doing around that, so that devolution isn't stopping people getting into employment?
So in terms of obviously it is entirely for Scottish Government to decide what they want to do in the areas that are being devolved. And so in a sense, the main thing is, are there elements of the eligibility which would require information from DWP because they relate to other parts of the system? So that's sort of part of it. And I guess the other part of it would be how our sort of set of premiums that we pay, in support we pay in some of our means-tested benefits relates to current eligibility. So one of the things we'd need to work out is what impact that then might have on the allocation of premiums. So that would be the kind of example where you could see how either it's information flows and understanding exactly what would be required, but also the kind of the way it feeds into the other benefits. As I was mentioning, we've been talking and working with Scottish Government on the Wave 1, which includes the Carers Allowance Supplement, which we're going to be supporting Scottish Government to pay in the summer, but also the Best Start grant for maternity and funeral payments. Through all of those, we work out, as they work through the detail of their policy, what might be required of the department in terms of information, but also has it got any wider impacts that we need to take into account? So those would be the kind of things.
And working together, that's exactly what we want to do. So if we could work together and create a portal, obviously we've done that with the landlord portal, that's what we should be looking to do. Yes.
Can I just come in there, Secretary of State? So we work with Business Enterprise Scotland and also Skills Development Scotland. So, you know, we've got the relationships to actually come together. So if you're signalling something that needs to be looked at, as Secretary of State says, I don't see a problem in us coming together and finding the right vehicle, because we put access to, for example, Skills Development website into our work coaches so that we've actually got the right information flowing through, because it's different to England and Wales. So, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I think this is going to be our final question very briefly. Ms Johnson, thanks.
I think it's fair to say that there's almost universal condemnation of the two-child limit on tax credits within this Parliament. And you know, we're speaking about how universal credit is progressive. I think that this policy shows that that's absolutely not the case. But you'll be aware that there are assessors in Scotland who will not take part in this policy. So I'd like to know if there are plans to publish statistics showing the number of people affected by the two-child limit in universal credit, and whether there is any evidence of a lower take-up of exceptions in Scotland due to the exception forms not being completed.
So the claimants who are on those benefits will continue getting benefits, and obviously the child benefit itself will continue for every child. It's the tax credit element that will change, and this has been worked out on the basis that people who are claiming have the same considerations of those people who are working and paying for their bills. So it is again looking for a fairness between people who are claiming and people who are working, that they're all considering and making the same decisions in life. But as I said, the child benefit will continue for every number of children. It will be looking at the tax credit changes there.
But you'll be aware that the Scottish Women's Aid and Rape Crisis Scotland, for example, have refused, rightly in my view, to act as third-party referrers. So is your government undertaking any research at all to see whether or not that will impact on entitlement in Scotland?
And what you're referring to there is the understanding that the government and the extra support the government's put in place for people who didn't or weren't able to make decisions over how many children they've had, and they have indeed got extra children. So more support will be put there, and we've said we'll make allowances in those instances. And you're right, we've said we will refer people so personal questions aren't asked from the DWP staff or HMT staff, and we'll refer them and work with whether that is third-party groups, as you mentioned, or it could be health professionals, or it could be other suitable people who could help people. I do hope that some of those organisations don't decide not to work with us, because actually what we're doing is providing extra help and support to those people who do. But we will continue working to make sure that the people who need that extra benefit will get it, and maybe it will be through other organisations and an extra route. But of course we will closely monitor that situation.
I mean, do you as a minister really, you actually are comfortable with the idea that a woman has to prove non-consensual conception in order to access an entitlement?
What we're doing is providing extra help where people have got more children that they couldn't have planned, and we're providing that extra support. There will be no questions like that asked, as I said, from the DWP or from HMT, and people will be supported and shown to the various other organisations. And again, this could give them an opportunity to talk about maybe something that's happened that they never had before. So it is potentially double support there, them getting the money they need and maybe an outlet which they might possibly need.
But it's potentially also incredibly invasive and upsetting if women are being forced to put on the record a situation or circumstance that they wish to remain entirely private in order to access entitlement.
There will be no invasive or delving questions asked. As I said, they will speak to people. They've obviously come forward with this reasoning and for this extra support, and it will be done in the most sensitive manner. That is obviously key to what is happening here. but it is in the light of providing this extra financial support that they seek.
Thank you, Convener.
Okay. Can we suspend again? Sorry. We'll go back into session, please. Can I thank the Secretary of State and her officials for their attendance. We very much value this opportunity for this dialogue between us and look forward to that happening again. I'm sure there's many areas that perhaps we haven't covered in detail, and I would welcome the opportunity for the committee to write to you if we have any further follow-up questions. Thank you. I'm formally closing the meeting. The next official meeting will be on the 3rd of May, as next week we have the Stage 3 debate on the Social Security Bill, and to close the meeting.